Most people think income slows because of motivation, competition, or bad timing, but income usually dies much earlier than that. It dies at the structure level. Long before revenue drops, something invisible tightens. Movement becomes harder. Results require more force. Progress feels heavier. That invisible tightening is called a bottleneck. And bottlenecks don't announce themselves. They quietly decide what your income will never grow beyond. A bottleneck is any part of a system that limits the entire system. It doesn't matter how strong everything else is. The slowest, weakest, or most restricted part sets the ceiling. You can improve every other area, but nothing outgrows its narrowest point. Income systems are no different. Your effort can increase. Your ideas can improve. But output remains trapped behind the smallest structural opening. This is why people feel like they're doing more, but getting less. They don't realize the system already told the truth. It showed them where growth stops. But instead of redesigning that point, they added pressure everywhere else. More hours, more content, more offers, more hustle. The system didn't become bigger. The strain just increased against the same narrow passage. Bottlenecks almost never look like problems. They often look like how things work. The way leads arrive. The way fulfillment happens. The way decisions are made. The way money moves. Because they feel normal, they stay unquestioned. But normal is exactly where ceilings hide. Every stable system eventually organizes itself around its tightest constraint. One common bottleneck is dependence. When revenue depends on a single person, channel, or action, the system hardens around that point. No matter how well everything else is designed, growth must wait for that one thing. That waiting becomes invisible friction. And friction always shows up as fatigue before it shows up as failure. Another bottleneck is sequencing. When steps must happen in a strict order, and one step is slow, everything behind it stacks up. This is where people mistake busy for productive. They are surrounded by motion, but starved of throughput. The system is alive, but nothing is moving forward because one stage controls the entire flow. A third bottleneck is feedback. Systems die quietly when they don't know what is actually working. Without fast, clear feedback, decisions lag behind reality. Money gets invested in the wrong places. Energy reinforces weak points. Time compounds mistakes. And the system slowly organizes itself around outdated signals instead of current truth. Some bottlenecks are technical. Tools that can't handle volume. Platforms that limit reach. Processes that break under scale. But the most dangerous ones are structural habits. Ways of operating that once worked, but now silently block expansion. They feel efficient. They feel familiar. But familiarity is not the same thing as capacity. Here's the key shift. Bottlenecks are not obstacles to push through. They are design flaws to rebuild. When effort meets a bottleneck, pressure rises. When design meets a bottleneck, capacity changes. One creates exhaustion. The other creates expansion. And income only responds to the second. This is why adding tactics often backfires. Marketing harder on a broken flow only magnifies chaos. Automating a flawed sequence only accelerates waste. Hiring into a constrained structure only multiplies management. When the bottleneck remains, every new layer becomes heavier instead of freer. High-growth systems obsess over one thing. Where is flow being limited right now? Not emotionally, not motivationally. Structurally, where does work pile up? Where do decisions slow? Where does revenue wait? Where does demand exceed movement? Those points are not annoyances. They are the system's control panel. When you identify a real bottleneck, everything else becomes quieter. You stop fixing 10 things. You stop chasing optimization. You stop arguing with symptoms. You redesign the one point that controls them. And when that point changes, the entire system reorganizes around the new opening. This is why growth often feels sudden. It isn't. It's delayed. Capacity was redesigned earlier, but output only reveals it after the system finishes rebalancing. People call it a breakthrough. Systems call it the removal of a limit. The danger is not having a bottleneck. Every system always has one. The danger is optimizing around it instead of rebuilding it. That choice trains the system to survive pressure instead of supporting scale. It becomes stronger, but not larger. Stable, but not expansive. Structural bottlenecks are also identity tests. They ask a quiet question: are you willing to change how the system works, or only how hard you work inside it? Most people answer with effort. That answer always produces the same ceiling. When you design for flow instead of force, income starts behaving differently. It stops feeling earned moment by moment. It starts emerging from structure. Results feel less dramatic, less emotional, less exhausting, and far more consistent. This is where real leverage begins. Not in multiplying actions, but in expanding what actions can move through. When the narrowest point widens, everything upstream becomes lighter. Everything downstream accelerates, and income finally detaches from the sensation of strain. Bottlenecks are not warnings of failure. They are invitations to architecture. They tell you exactly where growth wants to happen next. Not later, not someday, now, at the point where the system is currently telling the truth. And once you learn to listen to that truth, income stops being a mystery. It becomes a structural outcome, a product of how well the system can breathe. There is a moment every builder reaches where progress stops responding to effort. That moment is not discouragement. It is diagnosis. It is the system saying, I cannot move any more through this opening. And until that opening changes, no motivation, no consistency, no clever tactic will alter the result. At that stage, the most productive action is not to do more. It is to step back far enough to see the constraint itself, not the tasks around it, not the feelings about it, the constraint. Because once it is seen clearly, it can be redesigned. And once it is redesigned, the system will begin doing the work that effort was trying to force. That is the quiet power of structure. It does not hype. It does not rush. It does not struggle. It simply makes the next level of income possible. And possibility, not pressure, is what growth has been waiting for.